I was going through our paperwork for tax season when something caught my eye, a small inconspicuous bank statement tucked behind the stack of bills. At first I thought it was a mistake, a duplicate statement or a forgotten account. But when I saw the account number, my stomach dropped. It wasn't a joint account. It wasn't even linked to me. My husband had a secret savings account, one he hadn't mentioned, one that didn't appear in our joint finances. I felt a mix of anger, disbelief, and cold calculation. How long had he been hiding this, and why? The answer became painfully clear as I remembered his late nights, his vague excuses, the little lies about work expenses that never added up. He had been planning, quietly and meticulously, to leave me with nothing, to separate the assets while pretending everything was normal. I didn't panic. I didn't confront him, not yet. Instead, I smiled inwardly, feeling the first spark of something deliciously satisfying. If he thought I was oblivious, he had underestimated me. I had already begun plotting, quietly, methodically, and by the time he finally asked for a divorce, I would be ready. Over the next few days, I immersed myself in quiet observation. Everything my husband did now carried weight. The way he picked up his phone, the way he shuffled through documents, the hurried way he sometimes left the house. Each detail, every little inconsistency, confirmed what I had already begun to suspect. This wasn't just a hidden account. It was a carefully crafted plan to isolate me financially while he prepared to walk away with someone else. I started to dig deeper but cautiously. I contacted the family lawyer we had used years ago, someone I trusted implicitly, and set up a series of discreet meetings under the guise of estate planning. I asked questions carefully, probing into the legal avenues for asset protection without revealing the full scope of my discovery. Meanwhile, I reviewed our finances with a magnifying eye, tracing every wire transfer, every unusual withdrawal, and every account that could be linked to him secretly siphoning money. The picture became increasingly clear. He had thought he was clever, but he hadn't counted on me paying attention. The anger simmered beneath the surface, but I let it fuel strategy instead of rash decisions. I was calm, composed, and deliberate. Every move I made now was designed to shift power back into my hands. The hidden account, once a source of fear and betrayal, became my secret weapon. I began envisioning the moment when he would finally come forward, asking for a divorce, unaware that the advantage had already shifted entirely. I would smile, not in triumph over him, but in satisfaction that I had protected myself, my dignity, and the life I had built for myself. At night, I reviewed everything in the quiet of our bedroom, thinking of all the nights he had spent hiding, lying, pretending. I thought of the other woman, the false intimacy, the betrayal, and I knew something he did not. The game was already over, and I had positioned myself to win. I scheduled another meeting with the family lawyer, this time under the pretense of reviewing estate plans and updating account beneficiaries. Every word I spoke was deliberate, every question carefully phrased, designed to lay the groundwork without tipping my hand. The lawyer, seasoned and sharp, nodded along, unaware that I had already made up my mind. I wasn't seeking advice. I was quietly setting the mechanism in motion. Over the next few weeks, we executed the plan with precision. The hidden savings account, once a weapon in his hands, was quietly transferred, using the legal avenues we had reviewed, into my name. The transfers were subtle, appearing as part of normal estate planning and account consolidation. He had no idea. Every morning I checked the balances, savoring the fact that what he had thought would leave me empty-handed was now fully under my control. Meanwhile, I watched him carefully, noticing the small signs that he was unaware of the shift in power. He went about his routine, confident, smug even, unaware that every move he thought was strategic had already been countered. He was planning his exit, imagining a future where I would have nothing while I silently smiled, knowing that the leverage had already swung entirely to me. I allowed myself a quiet moment of satisfaction one evening as I reviewed the accounts. The money, the hidden security he had tried to claim for himself, was now mine. Not because of luck or chance, but because I had anticipated, observed, and acted decisively. I felt a rush of empowerment, an intoxicating blend of relief and triumph. The betrayal stung less because the game was no longer his. He had underestimated me, and that was the advantage I now held. Even as I planned the next steps, how I would respond when he finally came forward, the weight of control settled comfortably in my hands. I didn't need confrontation or spectacle. I didn't need revenge. The knowledge, the preparation, and the quiet execution had already shifted the balance. And I knew, with a clarity I had never felt before, that when he asked for a divorce, he would find the outcome completely unexpected. The day finally arrived. He walked into the house that evening, his posture a mix of casual confidence and barely concealed anxiety. I had sensed it in his calls, the way he lingered on certain phrases when speaking about work, and now it was tangible. He wanted the conversation over quickly, wanted to dictate terms before I realized the truth. He thought he held the power, but he was about to discover how wrong he was. "I think we need to talk," he said, leaning against the kitchen counter as if this were just another negotiation. I nodded, pouring myself a glass of wine, calm, collected, the picture of composure. "Sure," I said lightly, my tone devoid of fear, my posture relaxed. "Let's talk." He launched into his speech about irreconcilable differences, about moving on, about separating assets fairly. His words dripped with condescension, the kind of arrogance reserved for someone who believes they've outsmarted their partner. I listened, letting each syllable wash over me, my hands resting on the counter, my face serene. Inside, I was quietly smiling. When he finally paused, expecting a response, I set down my glass and met his gaze. "About the finances," I began, letting the words linger before continuing. "I've already spoken with our lawyer. Everything has been updated, consolidated, and secured. The accounts are in my name." For a moment, I saw the micro-expression, a flash of panic, disbelief, the realization that the control he had assumed he held was gone. "Wait, what?" he stammered, his carefully rehearsed speech unraveling in real time. "I know everything and I acted accordingly," I said softly, almost casually. "The hidden accounts, the transfers. You thought you could leave me with nothing, but I was prepared." My calm demeanor made the weight of my words hit harder than any accusation could have. There was no drama, no shouting, only undeniable truth and quiet authority. He floundered, trying to negotiate, to explain, to manipulate, but I didn't respond with anger or defense. I didn't need to. The evidence was on my side, the law was on my side, and my confidence radiated in every gesture, every measured breath. He had underestimated me, and that mistake was irreversible. Finally, defeated, he slumped back against the counter, muttering excuses that no longer carried weight. I watched him, silent, as the reality of his situation settled in. He had tried to manipulate and deceive, but the game had shifted long before he realized it. I had anticipated, acted, and claimed what was rightfully mine, not through revenge, but through careful, strategic foresight. After he left the kitchen, I sank into the living room couch, the quiet hum of the house settling around me. Relief, satisfaction, and a profound sense of empowerment coursed through me. I had not only protected myself, but I had ensured that betrayal could not touch the life I had built. I smiled again, this time fully, letting the feeling of triumph wash over me. That night, I reviewed the accounts once more, the balances secure, the transfers complete. The money he had hidden, the plan he had crafted to leave me empty-handed, was now entirely under my control. And as I looked out the window at the city lights shimmering in the distance, I realized that the freedom, clarity, and power I now possessed were far more valuable than the sum of any account. The days that followed were unlike anything I had experienced in years. The tension, the secrecy, and the fear that had shadowed my life were gone, replaced by a quiet, potent sense of control. Each morning I woke, I felt the weight of empowerment settling into my bones, a reminder that I had navigated the betrayal with intelligence and patience, and come out unscathed. I started reclaiming the routines I had neglected while living under the illusion of security he had provided. I cooked meals I had put off, organized closets, paid bills without fear of hidden accounts, and allowed myself to enjoy the comfort of a home fully under my watch. The freedom to make decisions, the ability to act without second-guessing, became intoxicating. Every action reminded me that I was in command of my life, and that realization filled me with both relief and joy. More importantly, I rebuilt my emotional foundation. Betrayal had left scars, yes, but I refused to let them define me. I spent time reflecting, journaling, and even laughing again in ways I had almost forgotten. I allowed myself to dream, not reckless fantasies, but visions grounded in autonomy, ambition, and self-respect. The ex-husband's deception no longer held power over me. His actions had been neutralized, and with them, the fear that had accompanied them. My relationships also regained clarity. I reconnected with friends who had noticed my silence or withdrawal, sharing laughter and confidences that reminded me of life outside of betrayal. My interactions were no longer clouded by doubt or suspicion. They were authentic, rooted in trust I had rebuilt in myself. For the first time in a long while, I felt whole, capable, and truly free. Evenings became my favorite time. I would sit with a glass of wine, reviewing the accounts, and feel a quiet thrill at the knowledge that everything was secure. The money he had tried to hide from me, the assets he believed he could claim for his new life, now existed solely to ensure my security and independence. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need confrontation. I only needed awareness, action, and the patience to let him underestimate me until it was too late. Sometimes I thought about him, the man who had deceived me, who had plotted to separate us while pretending loyalty. There was anger, of course, but it was tempered with the satisfaction of knowing that the game had already been won, strategically and gracefully, without the need for spectacle. And in that clarity, I found peace. I realized that real power isn't about drama or revenge. It's about foresight, patience, and confidence in your own strength. I also focused on what mattered most, the life I had built and the life I was going to continue building. I planned small adventures, considered projects I had set aside, and began envisioning a future where I was entirely self-reliant. The knowledge that I had safeguarded my finances, my home, and my dignity freed me to live fully again. No longer would I let someone else's betrayal dictate the terms of my happiness. By the end of the week, I understood something crucial. The victory wasn't just financial. It was emotional, psychological, and deeply personal. I had faced deceit, navigated it with intelligence, and emerged not only unbroken, but stronger and more aware. The freedom I now possessed wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming control, confidence, and the ability to trust myself again. Sitting by the window that evening, watching the city lights shimmer in the quiet night, I smiled. The man who had intended to leave me with nothing had miscalculated. I had anticipated, observed, and acted. The outcome had been inevitable because I had chosen to be proactive rather than passive. And in that moment, I realized that the life ahead was mine to shape, unshadowed by betrayal, full of potential, and entirely under my control. Life began to settle into a new rhythm. I woke up without dread, made plans without hesitation, and no longer worried about hidden surprises. The accounts were secure, the assets protected, and my independence undeniable. I focused on myself, small joys, personal projects, even reconnecting with friends I had neglected. Each step reminded me that I was capable, strong, and in control. The betrayal no longer had power over me. I had reclaimed my life on my own terms. Most importantly, I felt free. Free from lies, free from manipulation, and free to plan a future entirely mine. And for the first time in years, that freedom felt exhilarating. The weeks after securing the accounts passed in a quiet, almost surreal calm. I had long imagined what it would feel like to finally be free of the constant shadow of betrayal. but experiencing it was far more profound than I anticipated. Every morning, I woke to a life entirely my own, every decision mine to make, and every choice a reaffirmation that I no longer needed to bend to someone else's deceit. The freedom was intoxicating, but it was also humbling. I realized that true empowerment comes not from revenge, but from awareness and action executed with patience and precision. I spent mornings reorganizing my life, indulging in rituals I had long abandoned. Coffee tasted richer, the sunlight on the kitchen counter felt warmer, and even mundane tasks carried a subtle satisfaction. I was no longer living in fear of hidden accounts, whispered lies, or manipulative charm. The money that had been so carefully concealed from me now existed to ensure my independence, a quiet testament to the fact that I had anticipated, prepared, and acted before he ever had the chance to strike. Each time I glanced at the balances, I felt a surge of calm triumph. No one could take this from me. My emotional world was being rebuilt alongside my financial security. The anger I had initially felt toward him was tempered by strategy. I no longer needed to rage or cry over what had been done. Instead, I reflected on my own resilience, the clarity of mind that had allowed me to anticipate every move, and the foresight that had transformed a potential disaster into absolute control. I had faced deception head-on, not impulsively, not recklessly, but with deliberate action, and in doing so, I had not only protected myself, but demonstrated my own strength. Evenings became my favorite time. My home, once tense with uncertainty and subtle manipulation, was now filled with peace, laughter, and quiet satisfaction. I allowed myself to dream again, not naively, but with grounded optimism. I thought about personal projects I had shelved, friendships I had neglected, and experiences I had postponed, and I began to reclaim each one with deliberate intention. I realized that the true victory wasn't just in securing the finances, it was in reclaiming my autonomy, my dignity, and my capacity to make choices without fear. I also reflected on the lessons this ordeal had taught me. Trust, I understood, must always be paired with discernment. Love and loyalty, though precious, cannot shield us from deception, but awareness and action can. I had once assumed my marriage was a partnership built on shared goals and honesty, and the betrayal cut deep. But the pain had sharpened my instincts, strengthened my resolve, and revealed that my own intelligence and foresight were my most valuable allies. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat by the window and allowed myself a full measure of gratitude. The life I had feared losing, the security he had tried to strip away, and the dignity I had preserved were all intact. I was no longer bound by someone else's schemes. The quiet satisfaction of knowing I had anticipated his every move, acted decisively, and emerged unscathed filled me with a profound peace. And then there was the future. I imagined plans not constrained by deception or fear, vacations I could take without second-guessing, projects I could pursue with confidence, relationships I could form with clarity and self-respect. The betrayal that had once threatened to define me was now simply a chapter behind me, a reminder not of weakness, but of the strength I had found within myself. In the end, the divorce, when it came, was anticlimactic. He asked, unaware of the full scope of what I had done. I smiled softly, a smile born of quiet triumph and certainty. I didn't need confrontation, explanations, or vindication. The accounts, the security, and my foresight had already spoken for me. He had planned to leave me empty-handed, but I had turned his strategy into my advantage, and in that reversal, I found empowerment far beyond money. As I looked out over the city lights, shimmering in the distance, I felt a serene, unshakable pride. I had navigated betrayal with intelligence, patience, and grace. I had protected myself, reclaimed my dignity, and secured the life I deserved. And most importantly, I had discovered something irreplaceable: the quiet, enduring strength that comes from trusting your own instincts, acting decisively, and refusing to be controlled by deceit. The past no longer held power over me. The future was mine to shape. I had survived betrayal, outmaneuvered deception, and emerged stronger, wiser, and free. And in that freedom, I finally understood the depth of my own resilience, the power of foresight, and the absolute certainty that life, lived on my terms, could be not only secure, but deeply, unshakably triumphant.